Is that working for you, Mrs. Ashman? Ah, there we go.
Wonderful. And that is why you are science leader.
Let me just get my PowerPoint back up. There we go. Can you see that, Mrs. Ashman?
Yep, absolutely. We're all ready for you then.
Perfect, thank you. So as Mrs. Ashman said, I'm Miss Berry. I am one of the Year 5 teachers and also one of our science leads here at St. Peter's. I'm going to go through an information session for you about science and our curriculum here at St. Peter's, and then I will offer the opportunity for any questions at the end. Mrs. Ashman will be monitoring the chat, so if there's anything that you think of during and you want to put it in there instead of trying to remember it at the end, then that's absolutely fine. But with the beauty of Teams, I can only see my PowerPoint and Mrs. Ashman at the moment. So if you raise your hand or anything, I won't be able to see. So please don't feel like I'm ignoring you if I don't see that. So the first thing that I wanted to explain about was how our pedagogy at St. Peter's is just at the heart of everything that we do, and that includes science. So our excellence is standard pedagogy with our purpose and our critique, models and clarity, mastery and experts is really important for science as well, and we ensure that that feeds through everything that we do in science when teaching the children. There's a real focus in science on knowledge, teaching the children the knowledge that they need to be successful, but also the skills that they need to become an expert scientist. And I will talk a lot about knowledge and skills a bit later on, but that is sort of the key crucial element of science for us. As a science team at St. Peter's, we have planned a sequenced and progressive curriculum that starts all the way from reception all the way up through to year 6, and I will give some examples of that in a moment. But the lessons are purposely sequenced and they are progressive so that children can learn skills that are then built upon in future years. And one of the main aims for us at St. Peter's when teaching science is to equip children with the knowledge and the scientific awareness to prepare them for success in the wider world. So ultimately, we want our children at St. Peter's to become expert scientists, not only to help them with their learning at secondary school, but also to be successful in life. So this is our rationale for science. I won't read it to you. I will give you an opportunity to read it yourselves. But I guess the key parts in this are the words that I've highlighted in bold. So our rationale for science at St. Peter's is that we really want to prepare children for the wider world. And that comes back to equipping them with the skills and the knowledge that they need to be successful and to understand where the skills that they learn and the knowledge that they learn fits in with the wider world. And that's really important for them to be able to understand the world around them. We really want children to be curious and to ponder and ask questions and think about the big scientific questions and discover things through learning and through the knowledge and the skills that we teach them in lessons. And that's really important, and we encourage children to ask questions and to research them in lessons and both at home as well. And again, that links into working scientifically, and I will talk a bit more about this in detail a little bit later, but that links to the skills that we teach children in science that help them to become expert scientists. So we have 3 main aims of our science curriculum at St. Peter's. And again, I've highlighted the key information in bold. So the first one is for children to have real scientific knowledge of the concepts of biology, chemistry and physics. Now, I think that there's a little bit of a misconception that children don't really start learning about the specific disciplines of biology, chemistry and physics until they reach secondary school. And actually that's been a big shift in the primary science curriculum and about the knowledge that we want to teach children at St. Peter's. And one of the big focus for us at the moment is teaching the children the difference between biology, chemistry and physics and about why that's important. And that helps them to really understand those concepts better and understand how the knowledge and the skills that they're learning in lessons can transfer to those disciplines in understanding the world around them. We also want children to be able to answer scientific questions. So, for example, when they're out and about on the holidays or on a weekend, they might see something going on or hear about something in the news, and to be able to use their scientific knowledge to ask questions and to also answer them as well is really important. And I will keep going on about skills and knowledge because they are the fundamentals of our curriculum, but to really equip children with the skills that they need to understand the impact of science, both now and in the future. And equipping them with that knowledge is a stepping stone for them moving on to both secondary science learning and for their future employment. So we talk about our children at St. Peter's as scientists, and those of you that will have been on the history parent information workshop will have heard Miss Cunningham talk about children being historians, and we're really passionate about that. We don't want children to just learn science, we want them to become scientists. And one of the ways that we really promote that is by allowing children to have that real sense of awe and wonder about and curiosity about science. So I will show some examples of that later on, but ensuring that children are engaged by science, they want to learn about science, they want to learn about the world around them. And one of our main jobs as teachers is to really instill that passion and that curiosity about science, but to give them the skills that they need to investigate and discover and experiment and learn things for themselves as well, because that's really important. The science learning shouldn't just happen in the classroom, it should happen all the time, and we equip children with the skills and the knowledge that they need to be able to do that successfully. We want children to be confident with their science knowledge and their science skills. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is that children understand that science changes our lives. Changes in science are so important. You know, you can think about recent examples with the pandemic and the development of the vaccines. That's science. And I think sometimes children don't make those connections, and that's really important. So having children understand that it's ever changing and it really does change our lives. And I talk to children in my class about that all the time, and sometimes I think that they think I'm perhaps exaggerating or being a little bit dramatic, but when I give them really specific examples, they start to understand how important it really is. We're also really lucky at St. Peter's to have really inspiring engagement and enrichment activities, such as educational visits and expert visitors that come in and talk to children about science. Obviously, those things have been more challenged recently with the pandemic, but our offer of educational visits and enrichment activities is outstanding for science. For example, in Year 5, we have the Space Dome that comes in, and children have an opportunity to experience essentially being in space, and it's an amazing opportunity for children to speak to an expert and learn in a different environment and in a slightly different way. I know that Year 4 weren't able to go this term, but would go normally to We the Curious and do a digestion workshop. So we're really lucky to be able to offer children those experiences to really inspire and engage their learning about science. And then just to reiterate what I was saying earlier about children having a really firm grounding of the disciplines of biology, chemistry and physics, and that being backed up by the knowledge and the skills that they can build on in their science education. So not just about knowledge and skills that they learn in Year 1 being Year 1 learning, it progresses on throughout the school and beyond. So this is our curriculum map for science, and hopefully this will give you an opportunity to see what your children are learning about depending on which year group they are in. This is published on our website, so there will be an opportunity for you to have a look at this again if you would like to. What's really important about this as well is that the discipline of science is in brackets underneath. So for example, being a Year 5 teacher at the moment, we are learning chemistry, so we are learning about the properties and changes of materials, and you can see that next term we will move on to learn about physics, and we're doing an amazing unit on Earth and space. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that is really important to us is about the sequencing and the progression of our curriculum. So to give you an example, learning about materials is a key concept that comes up in Year 1, Year 2 and Year 5. And I will talk about the progression in skills and knowledge for children as they progress through learning about the properties and changes of materials through those year groups in a moment. But I think one thing that's really key for us that helps us and supports us with this sequencing and connection of learning is our retrieval practice. And ensuring that when children start their unit of properties and changes of materials in year 5, or when we start a new lesson in that unit, they're retrieving their knowledge in year 2 and year 1, because it's the foundations for their learning in year 5, and that's really important. One thing that we have noticed is that when we talk to children about this in school, their retrieval of those concepts and their learning is not very fluent. And so it would be amazing if at home you could be having those conversations with children about, oh, what were you learning today? And what did you perhaps learn about in year 2 that was really helpful for your learning today? Or did you learn about anything in year 4 that was really helpful for your learning in year 5? And just facilitating those conversations at home is really powerful for children to make those connections and for them to really develop their learning and understanding. So this looks like an awful lot of information on one slide, and I was sort of umming and ahhing about whether to take some of this out, but I haven't, because I think it's really important to give you an example of our curriculum progression. So the first thing is we want children to know more, remember more, and be able to do more after every single science lesson. And you can see here the inquiry questions that we have for each unit. So in everyday materials in year 1, children learn about the difference between objects and materials and the properties of those materials and how they can group them. In year 2, they use that knowledge to be able to think about how different materials are suited for different uses, and they start to think about the different properties of materials in how they can change shape. And then all of that knowledge is crucial for their learning then in year 5. So how we can compare and group everyday materials based on their properties. We obviously talk about that in a lot more depth and a lot more detail with more scientific vocabulary in year 5 than perhaps they would have done in year 1 and year 2. But they wouldn't be able to be successful in that learning without their knowledge in previous years. And you can see there that we then delve a little bit deeper about dissolving, about solutions, and also about irreversible and reversible changes. So hopefully that will allow you to see sort of real life examples about how our curriculum is progressive and sequenced. I just wanted to mention briefly about the impact of COVID on our science curriculum and what we're doing as a school at St. Peter's to be able to support children with this. Just like with all other subjects, we've done some subject-specific analysis to ensure that the key knowledge was taught during lockdown. So hopefully you will remember that even when we were online learning, children were learning science. And we ensured that children were learning the key concepts that were the building blocks for their learning in subsequent years. And that was some really important analysis that we did to make sure that children had that really key learning even whilst online. But even now, we are still identifying gaps in learning and making sure that we're filling those for children. So I keep giving year 5 examples because that's where I am all day, every day. So we will fill gaps for children from year 4 on relevant units, and that can sometimes be through retrieval practice, or we might use retrieval practice as a form of assessment to identify those gaps. But teachers are constantly reviewing that and ensuring that if there's a gap or a misconception in knowledge, that we are filling that in subsequent years to really ensure that we're bridging that gap for the learning that the children may have missed because of COVID. So another thing that you all know is really important to us at St. Peter's is vocabulary. Hopefully everybody is, confident with the knowledge now that the explicit teaching of vocabulary is crucial for children's learning of skills and knowledge across the curriculum, but particularly in science. And we have taken some of our best practice from other subjects and integrated that into science, because if it works for children in other subjects, it will work in science, and that's really important. So this is just a snapshot of one of the PowerPoint slides that we've shown to children in year 5. So you can see that there's some key vocabulary on the left-hand side, and that's that expert vocabulary that children need to be successful in that lesson. We talk about what the children already know about those words. We use some SPAG and spelling knowledge in terms of talking about prefixes and what we know about the prefix in to help us to understand the difference between soluble and insoluble. So if children know what soluble means and they can define that, then they can use their knowledge of the prefix in to define insoluble. And we also use STEM sentences, which comes from our best practice in maths, to really support children to reason with their understanding and to really explain their skills and their knowledge. And that's really, really important for us. So another one of the really crucial things for science is about children being able to work scientifically. And this links back to the skills aspect that I've been talking about a lot so far. So the knowledge is the content that we teach the children, and the skills are how children become scientists using the knowledge that they have been taught. And we explicitly teach children these skills as well. So children at St. Peter's not only develop their knowledge, but they also develop their skills. And that's by becoming hands-on scientists in their lessons. So again, another year 5 example, children last term planned different types of scientific inquiries to answer questions. And during those inquiries, they had to control certain variables, decide which ones they wanted to keep the same. And there was a lot of autonomy and independence for children to work together in groups and design those inquiries themselves. They were being scientists. It wasn't teachers dictating exactly what they had to do. We gave them the knowledge and taught them the knowledge about dissolving, and then said, let's plan an inquiry. And it was amazing to see the buzz in the room for the children creating their own investigations was just amazing. And their ability to discuss that with others and reason with their learning was really, really important. The experiments that they conducted also required them to use so many different scientific skills, and I've listed some of them below there. These skills are so important across all of the disciplines of science, and we teach them explicitly during the lessons along with the knowledge. And that's really important because children might think that they know how to observe, but actually observing is a real skill, and skills take time to develop, and they need that explicit teaching of the skills as well to support them to become expert scientists. Another thing that we're really passionate about at St. Peter's for Science is children having awe, wonder and curiosity, and I've touched on this already previously. But for children to have real wow moments, to be really engaged by what they've seen, to be inspired, to want to investigate things more, to want to learn more about science is so important. And at St. Peter's, we achieve this in a whole variety of different ways. And some of those ways are through experiments and investigations and letting children be really hands-on and practical with their science learning based on the knowledge that we've taught them. Another way that we do that is through reading across the curriculum. So using really high quality texts, looking at websites, looking at news articles and making those connections together. And that's really important to develop children's understanding of vocabulary and their fluency with reading scientific material. We also do this through videos and teacher demonstrations. So there's nothing more satisfying as a teacher to set up a demonstration and show the children and blow their minds, and to see their faces and the questions that they ask about what's going on is just amazing. And the vocabulary that they can use to explain what they're seeing is phenomenal. And I think that that is a real credit to the teaching that goes on here and the explicit vocabulary input that children have as well, and their confidence to ask those scientific questions. And as you can see there at the top, there's just an example of a little investigation that we did in year 5. So these are images just from my class. But we were about to learn about dissolving, and I wanted to really grasp the children's engagement and attention in that concept before I'd started teaching it. So I gave them some paper plates, I asked them to arrange some Skittles around the outside, and then I asked them to fill up a cup with water and pour it in the middle and see what happens. And the children's minds were just so inspired by what they'd seen, and the buzz in the room was incredible. They were all asking each other scientific questions about what they thought was happening and why it was happening, and then they were looking at each other's tables and seeing that it was all happening differently for different tables and why that might be. And then to be able to bring the children back and teach them the knowledge of what was going on, they had a real, what I call an aha moment, where they were really understanding exactly what had happened because we'd given them the knowledge to understand the scientific process that was going on. And what was really lovely about this is we gave them the plates, we gave them the Skittles, and we said, arrange them, pour some water. We weren't explicit about how much water to put in, whether to put warm water or cold water. So actually the children were looking at each other's and making those connections and understanding about how controlling variables and changing variables has an impact on what happens in science investigations. And even something just as simple as The third image shows a very organised group who did them in colour order, and actually how not only is it visually satisfying, especially for me that likes things to be organised and in order, but for children to recognise how that created something different compared to other groups that had not necessarily done that, or had poured the water in perhaps not straight in the middle but at an angle at the side, and how that changed the process that was going on. So it's just really important for us that children have that awe and that wonder, and that they're curious about science and they want to learn about science. And I know that that's definitely the case in all of our classrooms at St. Peter's. And I've even had parents and adults approach me and say, oh, so and so's come home and spoken to me about this today. And that is just amazing. And that's what we want. We want children to be inspired and to be engaged by our science curriculum. So I appreciate that I have talked at you for quite a long time, so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and give you the opportunity to ask any questions if you have any. Shall I just stop recording, Mrs. Ashman?
That would be brilliant. Thank you, Miss Berry.